was the worst royal engagement I ever did, a royal wedding I ever did, because Harry was determined to keep the newspapers away from it as much as possible. Everything.
Arthur Edwards spent decades behind the lens, capturing smiles the palace wanted remembered and moments it hoped would fade. At 85, the royal photographer finally steps out of the shadows, carrying stories sealed by loyalty and time. His voice trembles not with age, but with restraint breaking. What did he witness in private corridors, tense tours, and unscripted seconds? Why speak now, and who stands exposed by his memories, as silence lifts that many believed were safely buried forever? Will the truth rewrite royal history forever? A day of suffocating misery. Walk through the heavy doors of Windsor Castle on that unforgettable day, and the first thing you would notice was not the grandeur, the history, or the romance, but the heat.
The front of the castle has some excellent photo opportunities. And to go into the castle itself, you'll need to go into the visitor's entrance right here on the corner.
It crashed into you all at once, thick and overwhelming, like opening an oven that had been left on too long. The ancient stone walls, built to endure centuries of English weather, had trapped the sun's fury inside. What should have been a moment of beauty and celebration quickly felt like a test of human endurance. Guests arrived dressed for tradition, not reality. Heavy coats, tightly fitted suits, layered gowns, stiff collars, gloves, and towering hats became instant enemies. The sun showed no mercy, beating down through the chapel windows and turning the air stale and suffocating. Within minutes, faces glistened with sweat. Makeup began to slide. Perfume mixed with heat until the atmosphere felt thick enough to touch. People shifted constantly in their seats, desperate for relief that never came. Fans appeared everywhere, opening and closing at frantic speed. Women clutched them as if they were lifelines, waving furiously just to steal a breath of moving air. Men loosened their collars, tugged at their ties, and wiped their brows, some looking dangerously close to fainting. The polished smiles seen by millions around the world hid clenched jaws and quiet discomfort. This was not the fairy tale moment viewers imagined from their living rooms. Inside the castle, it felt more like survival than celebration. Among those enduring this ordeal was Arthur Edwards, a man who had seen it all. With decades of royal history captured through his lens, Arthur was no stranger to difficult assignments.
Well, I'm joined now by the Sun's royal photographer Arthur Edwards, political journalist Ava Santina, and Talk TV presenter Richard Tice.
His camera had weathered freezing rain, crowded streets, and long hours of waiting for the perfect shot. He had stood firm during the downpour at Prince Charles and Princess Diana's wedding, soaking wet but focused. He had witnessed the warmth and ease of William and Kate's wedding, a day that seemed to flow effortlessly from start to finish. Yet nothing in his long career prepared him for Windsor on that scorching day. Looking back, Arthur doesn't hesitate when asked about it. "Oh, I was there. Hated the day," he says, the memory still unpleasant. For him, this wasn't just another tough job. It was the worst day he could remember professionally. The heat alone was brutal, but the discomfort went far beyond the weather. After all, the royal family has never been afraid of bad conditions. Rain, cold, wind. These are challenges they've faced many times before. This situation felt different. What made it truly unbearable was the sense that comfort simply did not matter. Everything had been arranged with one audience in mind: the world watching from afar. Every decision seemed focused on how the event would look on screen, not how it would feel for the people inside the room. Guests were expected to sit still, composed and smiling, no matter how unbearable the conditions became. The message was clear: endure it quietly. Cameras would capture grace and elegance, while off-camera, people fought exhaustion and dizziness. The contrast between appearance and reality was stark. Even the press, used to being kept at a distance, felt the strain more than usual. Harry had insisted on strict separation, pushing photographers farther back than ever before. To capture even basic arrival shots, they were forced to rely on massive 800mm lenses, squinting through heat shimmer and physical discomfort. For photographers like Arthur, this made an already difficult day even more frustrating. The job became harder, the conditions harsher, and the reward smaller. Yet for viewers at home, the broadcast told a completely different story. They saw flags waving, crowds cheering, and a picture-perfect ceremony bathed in sunlight. Music swelled, smiles shone, and the narrative of joy played out flawlessly on screen. It looked magical, it looked historic, it looked happy. Inside Windsor Castle, however, reality painted a darker picture. What unfolded there was, in Arthur's words, a boiling, uncomfortable endurance test. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Every minute dragged, every movement felt heavy, and the desire to escape grew stronger with each passing moment. Arthur, usually calm and professional, found himself wanting nothing more than to get out, fast. There is a strange irony in all of this. A day meant to symbolize love, unity, and happiness instead left many attendees drained and miserable. The discomfort hinted at something deeper, something unspoken. Beneath the polished surface and carefully managed images, tensions quietly simmered. The mismatch between what the world saw and what people experienced told its own story. In the end, Windsor that day was not just hot, it was revealing.
Windsor Castle is a royal residence at Windsor in the English county of Berkshire.
Behind the smiles and pageantry lay exhaustion, frustration, and a sense that appearances mattered more than people. For Arthur Edwards, a man who had witnessed royal history at its best and worst, it stood as a reminder that not all that glitters on screen reflects the truth behind the scenes. Sometimes, the most telling moments are the ones hidden from view, where joy feels more like punishment and celebration becomes something to survive rather than enjoy. Was this all he witnessed at the event? Was there more to the misery? Let's delve into the details of the seating arrangement that sent an unpleasant message. Seating shenanigans. It wasn't just a list of names and chairs. It was a quiet map of who mattered, and who, shockingly, did not. What should have been a simple plan for a royal wedding instead became a silent statement that sent ripples of disbelief through the chapel. Men and women who had given their entire adult lives to the crown, senior royals, decorated military officers, loyal aides, and lifelong servants, were gently but firmly guided away from the front. These were people who had carried the weight of tradition for decades, who had stood in the rain, the cold, and the shadows to keep the monarchy steady. Yet on this day, they found themselves pushed to the back rows, seated so far away they might as well have been spectators rather than pillars of the institution. And who took their place? Not close family friends, not long-trusted companions. Instead, the best seats in the house were filled with famous faces from Hollywood, people with little to no personal history with the couple. Celebrities smiled for the cameras, settling into prime positions as if attending a film premiere. The contrast was impossible to ignore. The altar, once reserved for family and faithful service, now looked more like the front row of an awards show. Oprah Winfrey, who had reportedly met the couple only once, sat proudly at the center of attention. George and Amal Clooney, complete strangers to them by most accounts, were placed just as prominently. Around them were other stars, influencers, and industry insiders, faces well known to the public but unfamiliar to the royal family itself. The message felt loud, even without words. Fame had outranked loyalty. Arthur Edwards, the legendary royal photographer who had spent a lifetime documenting the monarchy's most important moments, could hardly believe what he was seeing. He had photographed weddings, funerals, jubilees, and coronations. He had waited patiently in all weather, climbed barriers, and followed strict rules without complaint. Yet now he joked bitterly that he needed a GPS just to find his seat. His view was blocked, his position reduced, his decades of service quietly brushed aside. Shaking his head, Arthur summed it up in plain words that carried deep disappointment. Oprah had met them once, he said, and there she was, front and center. To him, it wasn't meaningful or respectful. It was showbiz rubbish. And that phrase stuck because it captured exactly how many observers felt. This wasn't about shared memories or long-standing bonds. It felt staged, curated and designed for headlines rather than heritage. The unease didn't stop inside the chapel. Outside, as the carriage rolled past cheering crowds, photographers waited for that perfect shot, the wave, the smile, the moment of connection. But it never came. Harry and Meghan looked the other way. Cameras clicked, but nothing was captured. For Arthur and others like him, it was devastating. They looked the other way. He later said simply, "So for me, it was a disaster." Whispers spread quickly among guests. People leaned toward one another. Eyebrows raised, voices lowered. Some called it a networking event. Others openly wondered whether this was a wedding at all, or a carefully planned publicity move. The sacred atmosphere Windsor was known for seemed to fade, replaced by the energy of a glossy, celebrity-driven spectacle. Windsor Castle, a place soaked in centuries of history, suddenly felt unfamiliar. Where once tradition set the tone, glamour now took the lead. Where loyalty had always been rewarded, it appeared to be overlooked. The shift was subtle in execution, but massive in meaning. It suggested that long service could be ignored, that duty could be sidelined, and that star power was the new currency. For those who had dedicated their lives to the monarchy, the moment was deeply humiliating. They were not just seated farther back, they were symbolically pushed aside. This was not a small oversight or an innocent mistake. To many it felt deliberate, a clear choice to value global fame over personal faithfulness. And that is why this moment still stings. A royal wedding is meant to bring people together, to honor the past while celebrating the future. It is supposed to unite family, tradition, and service in one powerful display. Instead, this one left a sharp divide. Loyalists felt dismissed, traditions felt weakened, and the monarchy itself seemed, for the first time, unsure of its footing. In the end, the question lingered in the air long after the guests had left and the cameras had stopped rolling. How did a ceremony meant to symbolize unity become such a clear source of division? How did honoring vows turn into prioritizing visibility? And when a wedding chooses selfies over sovereignty, what does that say about the future it's meant to represent? Did Arthur find the feast worthwhile, perhaps? A compensation for the put-offs he had witnessed earlier? Or was it the same miserable deviation from normal? Let's find out. Vendettas and victuals. What began as a ceremony heavy with symbolism and tension did not end with relief or celebration. Instead, the mood seemed to sink even further once the guests moved on to the reception. If the solemn vows and stiff faces had already left many uneasy, the after-party added a fresh layer of quiet disappointment, served neatly but sparingly to everyone present. Royal weddings usually come with certain expectations. People imagine long tables bending under the weight of rich dishes, silver lids lifted to reveal feasts prepared by the finest chefs, and glasses endlessly refilled with champagne. These occasions are meant to overwhelm the senses, to say without words that this is royalty at its most generous, most confident, most secure. Food in such moments is not just nourishment, it is a statement of abundance, warmth, and shared joy. But this reception told a very different story. Instead of a grand banquet, guests were ushered into what could best be described as a stylish, yet strangely restrained cocktail hour. The setting looked elegant enough, carefully curated for photographs and fashion spreads. Yet when it came to what was actually served, the contrast was jarring. Small trays circulated with finger foods so tiny they felt almost symbolic, beautiful to look at, but barely there. Imagine guests dressed in outfits costing thousands, if not tens of thousands, of pounds, delicately picking at single bites of avocado toast or minuscule macarons. These were not indulgent treats meant to be enjoyed. They were platenables, gone in seconds, leaving stomachs still empty and conversations awkwardly circling around hunger. The food seemed to tease rather than satisfy, as though the appearance of refinement mattered far more than the comfort of those attending. Arthur Edwards, a veteran royal photographer who had seen it all, did not hide his disappointment. To him, the portions were not just small, they were embarrassing. He openly described them as pathetic, especially when measured against the rich spreads he had witnessed at earlier royal weddings. He remembered Charles's weddings, both of them,
who's Charles, Prince Charles, is going to marry, because he said that.
Where tradition and generosity flowed freely. He recalled William's wedding, filled with warmth and a sense of shared celebration. Even the weddings of Andrew and Edward, often overshadowed in public memory, had carried a genuine feeling of joy and welcome. By comparison, this reception felt hollow. Arthur admitted that he could hardly wait to leave Windsor once it was over. That confession alone spoke volumes. For someone who had devoted decades to documenting royal history, to feel such urgency to escape suggested that something essential had been lost. This stark minimalism did not feel accidental. It seemed carefully chosen, almost deliberate. The event appeared designed more for glossy magazine pages than for real human connection. Every detail was stylish, controlled, and tightly managed, but beneath the surface, there was little warmth. It was all presentation, no depth, all image, no generosity. The celebration looked impressive from afar, but up close it felt thin and unsatisfying. Yet the food, disappointing as it was not the deepest wound of the day. The true bitterness lay in the strained relationship between the groom and the press. Traditionally, royal weddings are moments when the monarchy opens itself to the public through the media. Photographers and journalists are not treated as enemies but as partners, helping to share the joy with millions around the world. It is an unspoken agreement, built on mutual respect. This time, that agreement was broken. Harry, driven by anger over harsh and often unfair press coverage of Meghan, chose to turn his wedding day into a quiet act of protest. His resentment was visible in his behavior, through sharp looks, deliberate avoidance, and calculated efforts to block photographers at every turn. Rather than seeing the press as witnesses to a historic moment, he treated them as adversaries who needed to be punished. For Arthur, this was unprecedented. Over his long career, he had captured moments of extraordinary intimacy and trust, including photographs of William's children just hours after their births, taken calmly outside hospitals with full cooperation. Yet on this day, he walked away without a single meaningful image. It was the first time in his entire professional life that a royal wedding yielded nothing for him. "I felt we were punished," Arthur later said, reflecting on the experience. He understood the pain Harry felt. Some of the things written about Meghan had indeed been cruel, but understanding did not erase the disappointment. Instead of choosing grace, Harry chose to hold on to his anger, and that anger seeped into the atmosphere, quietly poisoning what should have been a joyful occasion. This was not an act of duty or tradition. It was defiance. A historic royal rite was transformed into a battleground, where old grudges took center stage. The result was a wedding that looked perfect on the surface, but felt deeply divided underneath. Did Arthur envisage the rifts that transpired after the wedding? How did he feel when the rifts erupted? Let's dive into the details of the family rifts and explosive revelations. Fractured fairy tales. Fast forward from the wedding day, and the hairline cracks quietly hidden beneath silk, and smiles began to split wide open. What many first dismissed as a harmless modern touch slowly grew into something far more serious. A complete break from tradition. What was once described as a simple rebrand of royal life soon looked more like open defiance. Arthur Edwards, a man who had watched generations of royals up close through his camera lens, had initially been full of praise. He openly admired Meghan's early royal tours, saying she was incredible and a great asset to the family. At that point, hope was still alive. Many believed this new chapter would blend fresh energy with long-held customs. But the wedding itself became a turning point. It was no longer about fitting into an old institution while gently shaping it for the future. Instead, it felt like a loud statement. "We are not like you, and we will not follow your ways." Long-standing rituals were pushed aside and replaced with bold, attention-grabbing choices that felt more Hollywood than Windsor. The sermon stretched on like a dramatic movie monologue. Ancient customs were swapped for moments that seemed designed for headlines and social media clips. To Arthur, this was not evolution. It was a clear line drawn in the sand. From there, the distance only grew. Invitations to stay at royal estates, places filled with history and family memories, were declined. Hotels and private security teams were preferred instead. What should have been warm family gatherings slowly disappeared altogether. Over time, even the most basic connections faded. King Charles, a grandfather longing to watch his grandchildren grow, reportedly saw Archie and Lilibet mainly through photographs sent from afar. One of his first glimpses of Archie wasn't in person at all. It was through a press photo on a phone. To Arthur, this was deeply painful. He described it as heartbreaking, not just for the adults involved, but for the children who were losing out on something priceless. A royal family, for all its wealth and ceremony, is still a family. Cousins growing up together, shared holidays, quiet moments behind palace walls. These are traditions that bind generations. Arthur mourned the loss of this legacy. Bonds that once formed naturally were never given a chance to grow. A shared past was being erased, and with it, the sense of belonging that once defined royal life. What made the situation even harder to accept in Arthur's eyes was what he saw as a sharp contradiction. Publicly, the message was all about protecting family, mental health, and personal space. Yet privacy, he felt, was being used like a shield to push others away, while private pain was turned into public profit. Stories were told, interviews were sold, and personal struggles became global entertainment. To Arthur, this was not about healing wounds. It was about control. Then came the Oprah interview, a moment that sent shockwaves around the world. Arthur did not see it as an honest attempt at reconciliation. Instead, he viewed it as carefully timed drama, designed to cause maximum impact. Accusations, especially those involving racism, were thrown into the spotlight like explosive devices, impossible to ignore and devastating in their effect. The interview painted one side as victims and left the other unable to respond without appearing cold or defensive. Arthur called it a stunt, believing it elevated Team Sussex while dragging the reputation of the monarchy through the dirt. The fallout was severe. Whatever trust remained between family members was shattered. Relationships that were already fragile broke completely. The divide grew so wide that it swallowed any hope of easy repair. Once again, it was the children who paid the highest price. The saddest thing, Arthur said, is that the children don't get to see their grandfather. In a family built on continuity and connection, this absence spoke louder than any interview ever could. What began as glamour and spectacle ended in isolation and estrangement. Arthur described it as a kind of Declaration of Independence, one that mocked the very institution that had provided status, protection, and privilege in the first place. The system that funded the fairy tale was now being openly rejected, even criticized, by those who once benefited most from it. Looking back over decades of royal weddings, many of them filled with genuine love, grace, and dignity, Arthur did not hesitate in his final judgment. For him, this was the lowest point, not because love was absent, but because arrogance seemed to shine brighter than affection. What should have been a unifying moment became the opening act of a long, messy performance, where drama overshadowed duty and spectacle replaced sacrifice. So, dear reader, the next time a royal romance lights up your screen and captures the world's imagination, pause for a moment. Behind the polished images and fairy tale music, ask yourself what might be quietly brewing beneath the surface. This story reminds us that even crowns are not unbreakable. Beneath gold and glitter, human flaws still exist. And when pride, secrecy, and unresolved conflict take hold, even the grandest institutions can begin to crack under the weight of hidden chaos. Given Arthur's position in the royal family, did he have any information surrounding Archie's birth? Did he reveal anything about it? Let's dig into the details of Arthur's report about Archie's birth. Arthur Edwards's revelation on Archie's birth. For nearly 50 years, Arthur Edwards has watched history unfold through a lens few could ever imagine. Since 1977, his camera has captured the British royal family at their most human moments: celebrations, tensions, heartbreaks, and quiet victories. He has seen heirs grow into their roles, watched relationships bend and shift, and observed centuries-old traditions collide with the pressures of modern life. Edwards isn't just a photographer. He's a witness to the monarchy itself, a silent recorder of stories that most of the world only glimpses from afar. So when he spoke about the day Archie Mountbatten Windsor was born, it wasn't just another story. It was a revelation of a family and a monarchy at a turning point. On May 6th, the world watched Prince Harry and Meghan Markle welcome their first child. Headlines flashed, cameras clicked, and millions of eyes turned to London. But Arthur Edwards wasn't there, standing outside the hospital with other photographers. He was in Germany, traveling on an official royal tour alongside Camilla, then the Duchess of Cornwall. While the world's attention quietly focused on a newborn prince, Edwards was moving from engagement to engagement, fulfilling royal duties far from home. Yet even in a distant setting, history reached him. Edwards revealed something extraordinary. He was the very first person to show Camilla a photograph of baby Archie. At first glance, it may seem like a small gesture, simply handing a photo to someone. But in the world of royalty, it carried immense significance. He described the period as difficult times for Camilla, hinting at layers of emotion that went far beyond joy. By 2019, she had weathered years of public scrutiny, navigated fragile family dynamics, and balanced her position within a monarchy facing unprecedented scrutiny. Seeing Archie's photo wasn't just about welcoming a new royal, it was a moment that reflected the shifting tides within the family itself. Camilla, still the Duchess of Cornwall at the time, had long supported Prince Charles as he prepared for a future that would one day see her crowned queen. Yet, the royal household was under strain. Relationships were tense, traditional rules were being questioned, and public expectations were evolving rapidly. Even a newborn's photo could stir complicated emotions, a reminder that the monarchy was not immune to change. What made Archie's birth even more remarkable was how his parents chose to present him to the world. For decades, royal tradition dictated that newborns be introduced almost immediately after birth, often on the steps of the Lindo Wing at St. Mary's Hospital. Cameras would capture every angle, crowds would cheer, and the image would be etched into modern royal history. Prince Charles and Princess Diana did it. Prince William and Kate Middleton did it with each of their children. It was the unspoken rule of royalty: visibility, ceremony, and tradition above all. Harry and Meghan chose a different path. There was no staged hospital appearance, no immediate photo opportunity. Instead, they waited. 2 days after Archie's birth, they appeared together at Windsor Castle for a carefully controlled and intimate photo call. The setting was quieter, the atmosphere more personal, and the message unmistakable. This is their child, and they alone would decide how, when, and where he was introduced to the world. To some, the difference may have seemed subtle. After all, the public eventually saw Archie. But in the context of royal life, it was revolutionary. Harry and Meghan's choice signaled a break from centuries of expectation and a desire to protect personal privacy within a system built on constant visibility. They weren't rejecting tradition out of defiance. They were asserting ownership of their own story. By contrast, William and Kate's approach adhered closely to royal custom. Each of their children was introduced immediately, swaddled and held for the cameras on the familiar hospital steps. These images became celebrated milestones in royal history, but also reflected a different mindset, one where tradition, duty, and public ceremony outweighed personal space and privacy. Archie's introduction marked a quiet but seismic shift. It suggested that the next generation of royals might chart their own course, balancing family, duty, and modern expectations in a way their predecessors never had. For Arthur Edwards, who had spent decades watching royal customs repeat over and over, the change was impossible to ignore. He wasn't simply documenting a birth, he was witnessing a monarchy evolving before his eyes. In that sense, the photograph Edwards showed Camilla symbolized far more than a newborn prince. It was a moment that captured a family in transition, caught between centuries of tradition and the pressures of modern life. For those watching closely, Archie's birth was never just a personal milestone. It was a glimpse into the future of the monarchy, the start of a new chapter in a story still unfolding, and the subtle, yet undeniable, beginning of change at the very heart of one of the world's most famous families. Who is Arthur Edwards? Why was he so close to the royal family for so long? Let's talk about the man whose eyes, in the royal family, saw it all. The man who saw it all. At 86 years old, Arthur Edwards isn't just a photographer, he's a living witness to history, a man who has spent nearly half a century observing, recording, and quietly chronicling the lives of one of the world's most famous families, the British royal family. For 45 years, he has been the official royal photographer for The Sun.
By the royal family. Well, our next guest has spent more than 45 years photographing the Windsors.
Arthur Edwards.
Making him not only one of the longest-serving photographers in history, but also the person who has spent more time with the Windsors than almost anyone else. That alone is enough to pique curiosity. But Edward's story goes far deeper than tenure or numbers. His career reads like a royal saga. Over decades, he has accompanied the monarchy on more than 200 tours across an astonishing 120 countries. He has traveled from the palaces of Europe to the farthest reaches of Africa and Asia, capturing moments both grand and private, public and intimate. Wherever the royals went, Arthur Edwards was there, camera in hand, observing, waiting, and immortalizing the fleeting gestures and expressions that would later define history. Arthur Edwards' photography goes beyond ceremonies and travel. He captures rare, life-changing royal moments. From 7 weddings and 5 funerals to 7 births, his images preserve joy, grief, and new beginnings. Each photograph tells a story, offering intimate glimpses into the private, historic world of a family few will ever witness. All of these extraordinary moments, brimming with joy, sorrow, triumph, and tenderness, are compiled in his new photo book, Behind the Crown, My Life, Photographing the Royal Family. But this is not simply a photo album. It's an insider's diary, a rare invitation to step behind the curtain of the monarchy, to see the royals not only as figures of pageantry and protocol, but as real people with real emotions, quirks, and vulnerabilities. Through Edward's lens, we see smiles that are genuine, glances that speak volumes, and gestures that reveal the humanity behind the crown. What makes Edward's story truly fascinating isn't just the historical moments he has captured, it's the relationships he has quietly built over decades. While most photographers must maintain a professional distance, Edwards has earned trust and respect from the royal household itself. He has navigated the delicate balance of intimacy and discretion, allowing him access that few others could ever hope for. The royals have allowed him into moments that are usually private, moments that reveal personality, character, and emotion. In doing so, Edwards has created something rare, a visual record of royalty that is both historically significant and deeply human. His photographs are more than images. They are narratives. Each click of the shutter tells a story, captures a moment, or preserves a fleeting emotion. Edwards has the uncanny ability to notice what others overlook. A small laugh shared between family members, a pensive look during a ceremony, or the quiet gestures of someone lost in thought. His work transforms the way we see the monarchy, bridging the gap between public spectacle and private reality. For the world, the royals are often symbols. Through Edwards' lens, they are people. In many ways, Arthur Edwards has shaped the modern image of the British monarchy, from the poised portraits of Queen Elizabeth II to the candid, humanizing images of younger generations. His photographs have defined how the public perceives them. They have allowed ordinary people to glimpse extraordinary lives. And in doing so, he has transformed the monarchy from something untouchable and ceremonial into something relatable, emotional, and vividly alive. Behind the Crown also tells the story of Edwards himself, of patience, dedication, and a lifetime of observing moments most people will never see. It reveals how he has managed to witness history unfold while forming genuine connections with those he photographs. In a world where access is everything, Edwards's story is one of quiet mastery, the mastery of timing, of empathy, of knowing when to capture and when to step back. Arthur Edwards' life is a reminder of how photography can do more than document. It can connect, it can narrate, and it can reveal truths that words alone cannot. Through his lens, history becomes personal, and the monarchy becomes human. For 45 years, he has not just taken pictures, he has stood at the intersection of tradition, history, and humanity, bearing witness to moments that define a family, a nation, and the world's fascination with royalty. In the pages of Behind the Crown, Edwards invites us into this world, a world of glittering ceremonies, intimate family moments, and the quiet drama of real life behind the pomp. It is a story of trust, longevity, and an eye that sees beyond the obvious. Most importantly, it is a story that reminds us that behind every crown, behind every royal title, there are people whose lives are just as rich, complex, and fascinating as our own. And for decades, Arthur Edwards has been there to capture it all. So what do you think about Arthur Edwards' revelation? Why was he silent for so long? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.